Okay, so it's Sunday, April 7th, and today we're going to talk about questions from your grandchildren. So, TJ would like advice for each of your grandchildren. That's one of his questions.
Well,
Or what would you tell all of your grandchildren? What pieces of wisdom does the Mimi want to impart upon her grandchildren?
kindness, love, and if you're in a relationship, give up your need to be in control or to be right. Be absolutely honest in your relationship. Um,
Any advice about marriage or getting married or
well,
when to get married and when not to get married?
I think some of that's just pretty given. That you don't get married until you absolutely can't stand not being married.
Ah, okay.
And look at what you're serving. Are you serving some kind of roadmap that you certain age something's got to happen or something, or are you is this what your heart is saying? So it's just a question of I did not know Granddad until long after we were married,
Mm-hmm.
and fortunately we had support. We were isolated from the family because we were in Fort Campbell, Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to figure out how to work stuff out, and we did. And part of that is supporting your other partner when they need it and backing off when they're needing something that
Mm-hmm.
you can't give. Or it didn't sound real good, but
Nice. I know what you mean.
all right.
What about having kids? When should you or should you not have kids? What's looking back on your life?
I couldn't stand not having kids,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that was just our my generation. There was no question. You got married, you had kids, and if you didn't, there was something wrong with you, and you were
Right.
shunned or whatever. But I can't imagine not having kids. And I think that has supported our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It has certainly supported my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where I'd be today if I didn't have children. We'd probably be richer, no doubt about
No
that.
kidding.
But I don't think I would have the internal joy
Mm-hmm.
of seeing what's happening and watching the bloom.
When we were little, um, obviously Reagan and I were twins. What do you remember about us growing up, about our personalities and
Well, I mean, the two of you were so different that when it came to whatever evil thing you had done, we had, run around the room after you to paddle your butt. And you'd look at Reagan Kaka, and she was overpunished.
sure.
So the difference between the two of you has served you in later in life. But as a little kid, you got the bad rap.
I was a pain.
Well, you were insistent, and you had a need to be right.
Still have that.
How does that serve you?
I don't know. I realize now I'm often wrong, but I am also often right.
That's fine.
But
And it's not right or wrong. It just is.
yeah,
And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and you
yeah.
go in a different direction.
My tenacity has
Served you?
served me well.
All right.
Yes.
Good.
But growing up, what? So let's talk about Reagan. What do you remember Reagan liking and wanting to be? And I have my own memories about Ray, but
Well, like what?
well, I she always wanted to be a nurse and have a pet monkey. Of course, now we know monkeys can be really horrible and dangerous.
We know Elliot had a monkey.
What, Dylan from
Dylan
Delaware?
Elliott,
He
yes.
did?
He did.
Is that where she got the idea?
I don't know. And her name was Junior. It was a female monkey. And
A monkey or a chimpanzee? Do you remember?
I don't know. I was a
Okay.
kid. What do I know?
Uh-huh.
But he kept it at the hatchery. And he'd bring it over to our house periodically. And I remember one time it getting stuck up in the tree, and I don't know how we got it down. But in any case, Dylan Elliott's a good example of people that should have had kids and didn't.
Mm.
And I don't know if that was a physical problem, whatever, but they were such wonderful godparents.
So growing up with Reagan, one thing I can recall from childhood is both of us being labeled. And we were twins, and nobody would get our names mixed up until they found out we were twins. Then they would get us mixed up. And we were so different, not only physically, but personality-wise.
Oh, yeah.
It really was irritating that the minute people knew we were twins, suddenly we were a labeled unit, and we kind of lost our identity, and that was really irritating.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and people were always comparing us.
Well, I think that's a typical thing
Sure.
to do, yeah. But Reagan was precise. She wanted approval, I think more so than you did.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrapped herself around the procedures or whatever it was she had to do to get approval. And that was how she got her strokes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you had a different route.
Well, she was always the cute, pretty blonde one, so I had to find my way
Yeah.
because I wasn't ever going to be the cute little pretty blonde one.
I don't know how that child came out of me either. But it was kind of like you and I and Reagan and your father. It was kind of that.
Sure. And then Eric came along in 1970.
Yeah.
And I remember you when you were pregnant with him. He would kick
Yeah.
in your tummy, and I thought that was fascinating. And you called him Eric the Red at some point. But Eric was his own character.
Well, yeah, and I was much calmer as a mother. I could nurse him. He was much easier because it was just one.
Mm-hmm.
So I could enjoy being a mother.
Absolutely.
And it was, I mean, you got the one kid first, so you got broke in around. Are they still breathing?
Sure.
And all that.
Yeah.
So
I can't imagine having twins first.
Well, particularly when you don't know anything. And you don't, you're hanging up diapers out in the yard.
Oh, God.
And praying it doesn't rain.
And that awful, she sneezed, she's dying. Do I call
Right.
the doctor?
Yeah.
And that terror, that background feeling of fear and
Yeah.
terror that something's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine being a first-time parent with twins.
Yeah.
Now, you did not have a washer and dryer?
It was on the back porch, but it was Lily Deason who was our boss, who lived in the other half of the building.
So what did you, okay, but
We could use the washer, but I had to use the dry the diapers and all the clothes outside.
so what did you do in the winter?
Well, I think that's when we broke down and gave up our cigarettes for a couple of weeks and got a dryer. And boy, the sound of that thing tumbling was music to my ears.
But still, God, I don't know. So, knowing what I know having twins and knowing the 24/7, just of having a baby and having to deal with, especially a newborn, and the crying and the figuring it out, but to have two, now you were not encouraged to breastfeed.
No, I couldn't because you guys were in the hospital for a month.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
One, I forget which one, was 4 weeks and one was 5. And I think you came home first. And I tried to nurse, and of course by then
No.
it was too late.
So you had to make formula.
Yes,
And what did they make formula out of
it was
in
a powder.
1964? Do you remember the
It
brand?
was Similac.
Was it still Similac? Oh,
Yeah, but it was a powder, and we mixed it
Awful.
up and then put it in the bottles, and we had these strange caps, which would never have done again. But it looked like a good idea at the time.
Now, was Dad? I know Dad went to Iran when he was in the service at some point, but when was he? Was he home?
He worked rotating shifts. So he'd work 3 days as days, a day off, 3 days as nights, a day off,
Oh,
and 3 days as swing. So he was, as I'm going to bed, he's getting ready to walk out the door.
mm-hmm.
It was that kind of,
Oh, and then you've got babies.
yeah,
You didn't have any sleep.
no,
That's awful,
you were both in the same crib,
right?
and that helped. Except when I got up and took a diaper and threw it over my shoulder to come feed somebody, and your father thought I was going to try to suffocate one of you. It hadn't crossed my mind.
Sleep deprivation can make you crazy.
Yeah.
So you were there without really any help.
Well, we got a lady that came periodically. I kind of forget what the routine was, but she helped because I could work. I could go back to work, and
At the hospital?
yeah,
Okay.
and in fact, that's how we got her name, was from one of my bosses. And she would come, and I could, go to work,
Mm-hmm.
all that.
God.
But I had a piece of paper on the side of the refrigerator as to who drank how many ounces when.
Sure.
Because, you're sleep deprived and you forget, because you both look kind of alike. You were both tiny.
Sure.
And I think it was a challenge, but we both worked at making it manageable and tolerable because we knew it wasn't forever.
So then Dad finished the Air Force
Yeah,
and you decided to go back to Lancaster.
yeah. And what he wanted to do, he'd figured out that he wanted to finish his education, undergraduate, and be a librarian. So he went to Millersville, and of course he'd been at Antioch, and he'd gotten so many years under his belt. And, then he got on the train twice a week and rode into Philadelphia to go to Drexel for a master's. And at that point, I forget what I was doing.
We were at Temple Avenue?
Yeah. I think I wasn't working at that point. Well, whatever.
And then we moved to, you were pregnant with Eric when we moved to Haverhill.
Yeah. We moved in March, and he was born in June.
Right.
And that was also the time of the Kent State shootings.
Oh, right.
So,
I remember Eric as just being, and still, silly.
yeah.
And just like a good time and
Uh-huh.
and cute and liked dressing up and just silly
Yeah.
and fun and
Well, because part of it is because he was an easier baby.
well, he wasn't a preemie. Yep.
Well, he like a week maybe, but he still was 6 pounds
Yeah.
something, and you guys were 4 pounds something, and
Right.
lost weight in the hospital. Now there was also a question of something that changed my life or something.
So one of the other questions TJ had was talk about events that changed, moments in your life that have changed your life.
I can remember in Delaware being on this porch of the back porch
Uh-huh.
of that house, and I don't know why I screamed. It was fun. We were having fun, and I
Okay.
screamed. My father came over and shook my shoulders and said, "Don't ever scream. It scares your mother."
No kidding.
And I have never been able to scream since. And I always thought, my God, what if I got accosted or something and needed to? I'd just cackle. I was in a play one time and I had to scream and I just cackled. So we cut that part.
Fascinating. I never heard that story before.
Oh, well, there's probably a lot of things you haven't heard. But I've tried, driving in the car to scream and it still gets stuck. So some of those early messages are very profound, and if I really was, insistent, I'd really get I don't know, a speech therapist or somebody to help me.
Primal scream therapy.
Yeah.
What other early messages do you think you got? What messaging did you get from Grammy?
Oh, well, that was love and gentle. And I can remember we had company and we were sitting in the sunroom, and she had her arm around me. But it was like she was playing the piano with her fingers.
Huh.
And I mentioned to her later, and she said, I did have a song going through my head. Because she did play the piano. We had a piano.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I don't remember Grammy ever playing the piano.
Well, that could be. She didn't do it. I don't remember much of it either.
What else do you think, if you could go back, is there anything that you would change?
Well, I think everything has given me a gift hidden. I sure didn't think so at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it, I would like to have eliminated at least some of my need for approval and fear. There was a time when there was kidnappings and abductions and stuff. And of course we didn't have a TV and we didn't have any idea about the world. But I can remember lying in my bed and putting my hands up under the bedboard because I was afraid I'd get kidnapped.
Oh gosh, this was at Hunsaker?
No, this was in Delaware.
Oh, so you were little. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, you hear grown-ups talking.
Sure.
And you just kind of internalize it.
And kids hear everything and
They do.
see everything.
And they give it meaning.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite toy growing up? Do you remember?
Dolls. I collected dolls.
Right.
And every time Uncle Ken or Elliot or anybody was on a trip, they'd bring me back a doll from that country or whatever. So I had quite a collection, and I had no idea what happened to it. Probably went to Minerva's daughter, Margaret Ann, which is also my name.
Mm-hmm.
But I had dolls, and maybe that's why my mother instinct was so
Mm-hmm.
vivid.
I remember Eric had Tinker Toys and Lincoln Logs.
Yes, building.
And that whole generation of Fisher Price stuff that had just started. But we had dolls and books.
Barbie.
And Barbie. We were huge into Barbie. Well, so were my daughters. But I remember, and I have to ask Reagan if she remembers it, but I remember Eric being really little and putting, they weren't Barbies though, but they were dolls in the back of his little Fisher Price truck, and somebody saying, don't, those are the girls' dolls. Not like you shouldn't play with dolls, but it was,
Who's it belong to?
you don't, well, no, it was still boys don't play with dolls, but it didn't come out that way.
Yeah.
It was, here, why don't you put your blocks in the back of your truck instead and give those dolls away, put those dolls aside so you can put blocks in there. Just like, wow. But I remember Eric was 6 years younger than we were.
Well, 5.5, I think.
Was it? Okay. So I remember Eric at Laurel Lane.
Oh, that's where he was born, so.
No, he was born at Haverhill.
Right.
Laurel Lane was the big one in the house in the field. Yeah. And I remember we had that ginormous yard and then cornfield and,
that's all,
all of that stuff. Right. But it was a great place to grow up. But
sand piles.
Yeah. But I remember thinking, if we were outside playing, feeling responsible, and we got to keep an eye on him because he was a little kid, although he was made out of rubber, so he was just fine. But I remember feeling protective of him, and oh boy, we can't let him go running around in the cornfield because So you wouldn't change anything?
I don't think so. I would just hope I wouldn't give everything so much damn importance.
So what advice would you give a woman who is pregnant? Like, you've got granddaughters. Someday,
Don't smoke while you're pregnant.
don't smoke while you're pregnant, right? Okay, good advice. What else would you give advice?
Get help if you need it.
Okay.
And so that you can still have your loving heart there for the baby. And you're not so frustrated.
And depleted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that can happen very easily, and you end up saying stuff or doing stuff you wish you hadn't. And even if you have to go into debt a little just to get some help so that you're not.
So your best self is there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that personally. What advice would you give as far as divorce or breaking up?
Well, I think you need to get counseling around that. And there were times when I'd be frustrated with your father, and I'd think, I'm out of here. And then I'd think of Mima.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, we can't do that to her.
She would, yep.
We were all she really had. And things can be worked out if you still have that connection you had when you got engaged and you got married. But life changes and life pushes you in places you hadn't expected to be, and you adapt accordingly. And sometimes you need to kind of undo that stuff, but you need to do it as a couple. That's why I was trying to get Ryan and Sabrina.
Mm-hmm. To think about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are deal breakers for relationships or marriage? And what do you think are deal breakers?
I don't think necessarily that a husband having an affair is a deal breaker unless it's behavior that is consistent or is a fuck you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
People will say that's their deal breaker. There was a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you sit down, you work it out. Not necessarily everybody wants an open marriage or needs an open marriage. And it's not healthy for some people. But I think that, there's something to be said for working out the differences and acknowledging them rather than I'm right and you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be a last resort.
What about having children and not getting married? Having a baby with someone but not getting married. What's your opinion of that?
Well, the thing is, marriage still allows you the joint responsibility of being together. If you're not married, that means I'm not committed to you completely.
Mm.
And being a single parent is dreadful.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So, if you're going to be a single parent, that should be the last reason. And you want to avoid that if possible. But you don't want to marry someone that you're not committed to either, so.
And how old were you when you got married?
I think 23.
23, yeah. I was 20.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Well, but Marilyn was like 19.
Mm-hmm. And they stayed together.
61 years so far,
Mm-hmm.
62.
What financial advice do you have?
I started out in the marriage being responsible for paying the rent and all that stuff. And somehow it got switched over to Granddad doing it. Which means that I have no sense of money. And that's a flaw. I need to know how much my drugs cost. I just saw the bill.
Uh-oh.
But being responsible, if you're not paying the bills, at least knowing what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
keeping track of it, and if you aren't happy with the way things are going, you make sure that you switch stuff around so that it is satisfying.
what about some people now? The trend is to have separate bank accounts. Now, when I first got married,
It was automatic.
it was automatically
Yeah.
you had a joint checking account.
Yeah.
Now that was 1985, but obviously my later relationship with Mark I kept separate. But what is your advice? Do you have any advice about
Well,
that?
again, for me, it was automatic that it was our money, wasn't his and her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you blend them with his and her, you're talking about unity again.
Sure.
And if you're keeping separate accounts, I mean, that may work. And I'm not saying don't ever do it. I'm just saying that I think it says something about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I don't have an experience of that so much.
What about religion?
Well, I think part of that is how you were raised.
Mm-hmm.
If you were raised without any specific creed, you need to look at if you need religion in your life. And I was raised, when we were in Delaware, we went to the Baptist church. To this day, I can do Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st Samuel, 2nd Samuel, because that's what we did, wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there was no, nobody ever taught me how to pray. We didn't do much other than recite stuff and sing, Jesus loves me, this I know. So, I think religion can be a bind and it can be a separation, and that's something that you got to work out before you get married, before you really get serious, is how important is your religion to you?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have kids, what are you going to do?
So, and we were raised, Dad, my belief, which could be wrong, is that Dad was agnostic / atheist. And we were raised kind of Presbyterian, kind of, but not really. Although we go to the Jewish Community Center for...
It's whatever works.
Right.
Whatever's filling the bill at the time.
But I always kind of felt like you believed in God, and I could be completely wrong, but I was raised to believe in something.
Yeah.
But then we got woo-woo, which has resonated with me far more than a structured Christian religion. But that's my experience. I can't speak to Reagan or Eric. I know, Reagan, when she married Ted, they converted to or Episcopal, I believe. And then the kids, we did, they had christenings and they did all of that. But then it kind of went to the side when stuff fell apart, which makes sense.
They never maintained regular attendance.
Well, I don't even know how much Ted really believed in that.
Yeah, I don't either.
But the structure of it made sense at the time.
Yeah.
When over the past 30 years, I know my belief system has evolved and changed drastically.
Yeah, mine too. Certainly.
So right now, today, what do you believe?
I think that's still evolving. God is not a man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. If anything, it's a woman. But I don't think that there's a being. If so, it'd be Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jesus visited me one time when I was, and somebody else in the room felt a presence. In any case, I think...
well, tell me about that.
Well, I was...
When was this?
It was in Cleveland. I'd gone to a guy who did good body work.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was... pretty much in trance. I was at the top of the hill at the Cliffs of Moher, looking down that path.
Nice.
And I saw him coming up. And that's all I remember.
Nice.
I don't remember any words. I don't remember any exchange. I don't know if he even made it to the top of the hill. but was validated by the wife of the guy saying, I felt his presence.
Nice.
So who knows? I think we're not going to know. I think we do whatever works. And
What happens when we die? Do you
Well,
think?
either it's going to be wonderful and we'll see everybody we knew and get all our body parts fixed. And if that doesn't happen, then nothing happens and we're not going to know that.
So either way, you're okay.
Absolutely. I
Okay.
have no fear of death. Because it's either going to be wonderful or nothing. But I'll probably be out of pain anyway.
I'm sure. Yeah. But you got a phone call from Grammy when she
Yes,
died.
I did. Oh, it was a couple of days afterwards. And I was at Dave's. And I was kind of snoozing on his couch. I was the only one in the house. He'd gone off to do errands or something, and the phone rang. And I thought I'd better get it. And it was Grammy saying how proud she was of us for how we were handling her death.
Okay.
And she said that she was fine, that there was something not right. I don't know if it was her eyes or something, and they were going to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And that she just wanted to touch base and let us know that she was fine. And all I could think of, and that was the old days, who's paying for this call?
I think it was free, Mom.
Yeah.
So how did that make you feel?
I felt closure. I felt that, the fact that she was where she wanted to be and was all right,
Mm-hmm.
and that she knew we knew that.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Now, have you had any dream visitations by anybody that you remember?
If so, it wasn't anything. I didn't learn anything or hear anything or whatever. A drumming circle I was in Cleveland, down in Little Italy. And I had my bowrun and my tom-tom,
Sure.
and we had strum going.
Cool.
And I remember at one point having my eyes closed and just seeing a group of people, and I didn't know if I even knew any of them. I don't know.
Were they like hanging there observing or
Yeah,
supportive
they're kind of standing
and
out in a group, just kind of standing there for me to look at them.
anything you want to talk about being psychic or the spiritual connection you have with people?
I don't know what to say to respond to that.
Let me rephrase it. Do you feel like you have any connection to people that have passed over now?
Yeah.
Tell me why you feel that way.
Because there's no way it couldn't be. The basis is love.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And when you have loved that intensely, as a parent, as a brother, sister, whatever, past, spouse, there's something about that quality that connects you with them forever in some form or another. So, Jib had heard from Papa.
Really?
Yeah. And he was told how pleased he was with how he had handled things. And he's another one that never got a good degree.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that you have control over whether you can communicate with people or not?
No. I think either they have to be willing
Sure.
or I have to really have a big need.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't had that opportunity or that need yet. There are times when I connect in or try to connect in. And I don't know always if I've done it or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I just feel better.
Sure. Absolutely. So, to wrap things up for this interview, when you're thinking about your grandchildren, we have obviously TJ, well, we have Shannon, Aaron, Connor, TJ, Ryan, and Meg.
There may be more that we don't know about.
There may be grandchildren? I don't think so. Great grandchildren are also obviously, but for your grandchildren, what advice do you have, or what message would you have for your grandchildren? And you can do it as a group or individually. What do you want to, let's do it individually. What would you want Shannon to know?
That she's better than she thinks she is.
Nice. Okay.
And the same with Aaron.
Yep.
They don't know how strong they are or how their capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true of Ryan too.
Absolutely.
I don't talk to Connor. I don't know what he needs.
I think he's just fine.
Yeah, he's eating Big Macs or something.
I don't know. What about TJ?
TJ is a wandering spirit.
Yes.
And he's got a curiosity. And I just would hope that he would continue to honor that and be able to continue to explore the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give Ryan as a young father?
Well, I see how he loves his daughter.
Yes.
And I'm very happy about that because I know he works so many hours and he doesn't have not much time with her. But I'm very pleased to see how attentive he is.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Gentle. And the love there that's, I think keeping him there.
What advice would you give Meg?
Well, I don't think Meg has any idea how much strength she has or capability. And I think she needs to be reminded about that periodically because I think she also has this, am I good enough? And of course, I had that all my life.
I was going to say, we all have that.
Yeah.
Well, in Guatemala, where she is right this minute with Granddad and TJ and Uncle Eric, she's gone ziplining.
Yeah.
So that's good. She's had some adventures.
She'll put that in her experience bag.
Yep, that's good. I hope she continues to do things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
That's one of the joys that Granddad and I have is being able to incorporate some of you kids as we go places or do things.
mm-hmm. Well, you guys you traveled my whole life.
Yeah.
Egypt and Greece when we were 6, and
Mrs.
all of
Miller?
Mrs. Miller, who would threaten to spank us with the cheese grater.
Yeah.
I still have trauma from that. And how many times you've been to? I can't even remember all the places you've been. Europe 1,000,000 times. Ireland, England, Malta. Have you gone?
China?
Have you gone to Scotland?
No.
Okay.
We haven't done Scandinavia at all.
But you did China.
Yeah.
And then of course Guatemala.
Yeah.
And all of the United States, but
Canada.
Traveling is important
Mexico.
to our family.
It is.
That exploration.
And the other thing is it's losing its autonomy.
Mm.
It's all going to have a Burger King and a Kentucky Fried Chicken. They're all going to look alike, and I'm afraid they're going to lose their special identities.
Oh, I hope you're wrong. But I see why you think that.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, in our family, I used to joke that our religion was reading and traveling.
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, I agree. We've only been to Ireland 16 times.
Oh, gosh. Any other final bits of wisdom from the Mimi?
I don't know. I may think of something, but not right now. I don't have anything coming up.
All right.